This man always believed his marriage was different, that they weren't like those couples who dragged themselves through the years without love, trapped in an empty routine. They were partners, accomplices, lovers. Or at least that's what he thought. One night, after a long trip, with his body still warm from the shower and his mind clouded by exhaustion, hearing the truth come out of his wife's mouth felt like a lethal poison. The affair, the other man, the betrayal, it had all happened years ago, but to him it was as if it had just occurred. Now he was left with two options: leave and abandon everything he had built, or stay and spend the rest of his days living with the shadow of betrayal. My wife and I are in our 40s. We've been married for 19 years, dated for 3 years before that, and started living together a year before getting married. We have 2 daughters, 18 and 15 years old. Our eldest started college last fall. My wife and I have always gotten along well. We agree on most things and have never had any really serious arguments. We're devoted parents, and I thought we were equally committed partners. We have always shared a lot of intimacy and genuine affection for each other. Both of our families are great, and everyone gets along. I have a good job and salary, and she works as a fundraiser for an agency which she loves. A few years ago, we sold our house and moved to a new neighborhood. It was a new-build home, and we bought it because we wanted something smaller and more modern, with all the latest upgrades. Plus, it's a single-story home, which we thought would be ideal for when we get older. We had great neighbors in our old house, and fortunately, we have great ones here too. Everyone gets along and looks out for each other. We became particularly close to a couple who live across the street. For this story, I'll call them Jan and Joe. They're in their 60s and are a lot of fun, always in a good mood, and you can tell they have a great relationship. They've become like a second family to us. This past October, we went on a weekend trip with them and another couple from the neighborhood. It was a food and wine tasting event during the harvest season, and we all had a fantastic time. We visited several restaurants, had amazing meals, and enjoyed great wine. Friday and Friday night were wonderful, and Saturday was just as great. We were all having a fantastic time. On Saturday night, we lit some fire pits. The women sat around one fire pit with their wine glasses, chatting, while we men sat around another drinking. Neither my wife nor I are big drinkers. At most, we have 1 or 2 drinks a month. I didn't drink much that night, but my wife and the other women drank a bit more than usual. I could tell because they were getting louder and laughing nonstop. We jokingly had to ask them to keep it down several times. Around midnight, we men walked over to them, exhausted and ready to call it a night. By that time, the women were completely drunk and almost asleep, so we helped them up and took them to their rooms. After spending the whole night by the fire pit, my wife and I smelled like smoke, so we decided to take a shower. We got out of the shower, dried off, brushed our teeth, and got ready for bed like we always do. As we were getting ready, we started talking about the night and what we had discussed. I noticed that my wife seemed a little uncomfortable with something, so I asked her what was going on. It was then that she told me that Jan had shared with the women that she had cheated on Joe at the beginning of their marriage. I was completely shocked and reacted accordingly. I felt disgusted and outraged. My wife told me that Joe had forgiven Jan and they moved on, had 4 kids, and a wonderful marriage. I made a comment saying that I wouldn't consider a marriage wonderful if she had cheated on me. When I said that, my wife started crying, and I asked her why she was so emotional. That's when she confessed that she had also cheated on me at the beginning of our marriage. For a moment, I thought she was just drunk, delirious from the alcohol, having some kind of hallucination. But no, I quickly realized she was serious. I started asking questions, and at first, she was so upset she couldn't speak. She was crying and gasping for air. Finally, after calming down, she told me that it all started shortly after she went back to work after being home for a while to care for our first child. The person she had the affair with was someone who worked with her at the agency. She told me that after giving birth, she fell into a depression and felt really bad about herself. And that's why, foolishly, she gave in to the flirting and advances of that man. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and I asked her if it was just a one-time thing. She said no, it happened around 3 small times. But then she admitted that they kissed and were together for about a month beforehand. She told me the affair happened at the office, when no one else was around. At that moment, I was furious in every possible way and started raising my voice. When she saw my reaction and realized I wouldn't react like Joe, she started crying loud enough for others to hear her. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I told her to calm down, and we'd talk about it on the way back home. The next day, we went to bed and she tried to hug me, but I pushed her away and told her to stay on her side. She obeyed and spent the rest of the night crying on the pillow until she finally fell asleep. I couldn't sleep at all that night, sweating from stress and rage. In the morning, I took another shower to try to clear my mind. Then I went downstairs and made a pot of coffee, and the other guys joined me on the back porch. Outside, the air was fresh and invigorating, with that pleasant autumn smell. It should have been a quiet, pleasant Sunday morning, but it was nothing like that. Our original plan for the day was to relax in the morning, go out for lunch, and then start the journey back home. But that was no longer going to happen. I wasn't in any condition to go on with those plans, so I told the guys we'd leave earlier because something came up at work that I needed to take care of. After talking with them for a bit, I went upstairs to wake up my wife and told her to pack because we were leaving. She started crying again and apologizing, but I told her to save it for the trip. We packed everything, loaded it into the car, and left before the other women woke up. Before we left, I thanked the guys and asked them to tell their wives that we'd see them back in the neighborhood. It was miserable. Imagine being exhausted, with the worst headache of your life, and having to drive for 5 hours next to the woman who just confessed she cheated on you. It wasn't fun at all. I admit I felt extremely irritated several times, to the point where I needed to stop the car to calm down. Since that day, my life has never been the same. This happened in mid-October, and since then, my relationship with my wife has completely changed. For now, I've decided to take some time to think and not make any decisions until after the new year starts. I told her I didn't want anyone to know anything until I figured out what to do. In the meantime, we're pretending everything is fine, but behind closed doors, the situation is completely different. She doesn't know what I'm going to do, and it's driving her crazy. I was honest with her and said I don't know if I'll be able to stay married to her, and that even if I decide to stay, nothing will ever be the same again. I told her I no longer trust her, and I also made it clear that I no longer love her. That destroyed her, and she started to panic, asking me 1,000 times what she could do to change how I feel. I told her there's nothing she can do, and that the best thing would be to give me space. But she's losing emotional control and is constantly begging me for forgiveness. It's terrifying how quickly my love for her faded. All the respect and affection we built over the years disappeared in an instant. She chose to do what she did even if it was years ago, and that changed forever how I feel about her. I loved my life before this, and I truly didn't want anything to change, but I don't see how I could continue with her. Is there any strong man who has managed to get past something like this? If so, how did they do it? Update. As some have asked, here are more details about the unfortunate guy she cheated on me with. They worked together for about 2 years at the agency. According to my wife, the affair started a few months after she started working there. At the time, she was 27, and the guy was single in his early 30s. She told me she did it because she felt depressed and unattractive, and she let herself be carried away by the excitement of feeling desired by him, a mature and established man. She claims she never intended for it to go anywhere, but things got out of control. Those are her words, so take it with skepticism because that's how I do. She swears they were intimate only 3 times, but admits they kissed for several weeks beforehand. She had just given birth a few months before starting that job, so it's clear that her coworker was a desperate idiot who took advantage of a vulnerable woman. But she willingly participated, so as far as I'm concerned, she's 100% to blame. Personally, I find it hard to believe they worked together for another 18 months and never did anything again. But she swears it's true and is willing to take a polygraph test. She says that after leaving that job, she completely lost contact with him, and that she doesn't know where he is today nor cares. I tried to find him on social media and even Googled him, but I couldn't find anything about him. He was originally from the UK, so maybe he went back there. It's also possible he's out of this world, which wouldn't disappoint me, though I know I shouldn't have those thoughts. Regarding therapy, she started going the week before Thanksgiving, and I agreed to go with her for a session after the new year starts. Maybe I'll change my mind before then, but for now, that's the plan. You asked me if it's possible to get past this. Of course it is if you really want to. The question is, do you want to? Betrayal is the greatest form of disloyalty, but it can be overcome if the person who cheated is genuinely remorseful, and if the person who was betrayed is open to forgiveness. I forgave my husband for cheating on me when I was pregnant with our second child. It was difficult, but I did it, and looking back, I think I made the right decision. That was 34 years ago, and since then, we've been great together. For him, it was a stupid mistake, and even today, he still apologizes to me. Infidelity is a non-negotiable boundary for me, and my wife knows it. We've been married for 13 years, and if I discovered that she cheated on me yesterday, 10 days ago, or 10 years ago, I would immediately ask for a divorce and tell the world what she did, even if I had to spend every last penny to do so. I would not disrespect myself like that, and I couldn't live with myself. I know every person is different, but that's my stance, and that's how I would handle it. It can work, but your wife will have to do all the heavy lifting, and she'll have to do it forever. My wife confessed to a one-night affair 4 years ago. I left the house and was moving forward with the divorce, but then I decided to give her a second chance after she gave me a list of promises I couldn't refuse. Since then, she has been excellent, but she knows she can never let her guard down. If things get out of control, or if I'm bothered for any reason, I'll be out the door faster than Speedy Gonzales. Are you ready for a life like that? Can she walk on eggshells forever, keeping exactly the pace you need? If not, it's doomed to fail. Update 2. I had some extra time this weekend, so I decided to write this update, though I hadn't planned to for several reasons that I won't reveal right now. For now, I've decided to stay in my marriage, after a lot of thinking. Oh, but it's not what you might be thinking. For those who didn't see my original post, I've been married for almost 20 years to the woman I thought was the perfect wife. Last fall, my wife and I went on a weekend retreat with some friends. One night, my wife got very drunk with the other women and confessed that she had an affair with a coworker at the start of our marriage. After discovering it, I didn't want anyone to know because I didn't want our families, especially our daughters, to see their mother differently. Yes, the girls are mine, they look like me, and we even did that ancestry test a few years ago. I didn't want to make a rash decision and preferred to let everything calm down to see how I would feel after 30 days, 60 days, or even months. Although I decided to stay in the marriage, my relationship with my wife is now different. I no longer trust her, and I haven't regained the love I once felt for her. I can't do the little things I used to do out of love. Those simple gestures you do for someone you love, like buying their favorite blueberries at a special store far from home. We had a little game, if you can call it that, where I would surprise her with food, bribing her with her favorite dishes. But the truth is, all I really wanted was for her to relax and enjoy the moment with me. All of that has completely disappeared. I tried to force myself to do it, but when I'm standing in the aisles of the supermarket, I just feel bad. Now I only buy what we need, not what might make her happy. The habit of holding hands has disappeared because I can't relax without feeling a twinge of irritation. Goodbye kisses feel forced. Every time I try, it's like being stabbed inside. I hope this makes sense. I don't know how to explain it more clearly. I definitely no longer love her the same way I love my daughters, or even my parents. It's more like a business partnership. Our lives are too intertwined to just leave, but still, I can't even see her as a friend, because a real friend wouldn't betray me like that. I think now she's more like a close acquaintance. We still sleep in the same bed and have sex, sometimes a few times a month, but it's more of a physical need without feeling. Before all this, it was several times a week, and I really enjoyed it. She has been going to therapy, and I went with her to a session in January. The therapist was completely focused on a mental theory about why my wife did what she did. I told her directly that I didn't believe in any of that. I don't think it was because she was depressed, I don't think it was because she felt unattractive, and I don't think she needed validation from another man. I said what I really think. She did it to satisfy her own selfish pleasures. I warned the therapist that nothing she said or did to make my wife change would alter my opinion, and I asked her to stop insisting on that subject. The therapist backed off, but it was clear she was surprised by my response. She probably thinks I'm the difficult one in this story. Well, what can I do about it? The only other notable thing that came from that session were some questions she asked me. The therapist found it interesting that I hadn't stopped having sex with my wife. She used those words. She asked me several questions about the fact that my wife and I never stopped making love. I corrected her and said that we no longer make love. Now we just do it. I explained that for me, it's now just a necessary bodily function like going to the bathroom. I said it in a less polite way, but it's the truth. It's something you need to do for relief. And when you do it, it feels good, but once it's over, you don't think about it anymore. I know it's a blunt description, but that's how I feel now. She asked me to explain further, and I told her it's something that needs to be done. And since I still live with my wife, I'll keep doing it with her if she's willing. The therapist said it seems like I'm just using her. I replied, yes, in a way you're right, just like her lover did. The therapist disagreed with my attitude, and I didn't return for a second session, even though my wife begged me to. She still sees the same therapist every few weeks for follow-up and says it has really helped her. Fine if it helps her. She can keep going forever if she wants. That won't change my opinion at all. I haven't forgiven her and I never will, no matter what she does or says. When I analyze everything, I realize that the reason I stayed was because I like my life. I'm 47 years old, and I really don't want to go through the process of finding another woman or becoming a single man. That's not me, and I'm not interested in either of those options. I also don't want to give up half of everything I've built in 20 years and pay a fortune to a lawyer to settle this. Maybe I'm naive, but I believe my wife's story to some extent. However, I don't believe it was just 3 times. I think the affair continued the entire time she worked with him, and nothing she does or says will change my opinion. She swears it wasn't, but I've already told her to drop the subject because I don't want to discuss it anymore. The biggest change I notice is the way I feel about her and how I am as a husband. The feelings of trust and deep love I had for her are gone forever. For those who see us from the outside, it seems like the same marriage, but in reality, in many ways, things are better for me, because now there are no more expectations from her towards me. That means I can prioritize my needs in every way, always. When you're in a balanced marriage, you and your wife make compromises. You want to do one thing, she wants to do another, and you meet halfway. Now, my wife knows that with me, there are no more compromises in anything. I do what I want, when I want. She can accept it or not, but that's not my problem. For example, when she asks me if I want to go with her to visit her parents, I would usually go out of a sense of family responsibility and to please her. Now I go if I want to go, and if I don't want to, I don't go. I'm just using this as an example because I actually have a great relationship with my in-laws and enjoy spending time with them. But you understand what I mean. The last thing I will say here is about my decision to keep this between my wife and me, because many of you have questioned me for doing so. But since I don't plan on leaving the marriage right now, I don't think anyone else needs to know. If we ever get divorced, then it will be a different story. It will be on my terms. Oh yes, then I'll tell the world what she did. Power games, manipulation? That's more cruel than divorce, isn't it? I don't care. Well, whatever any of you may say, I've already said it to myself every time I look in the mirror. For now, I don't want my daughters to know because I don't want them to think less of their mother. And I don't want them to think less of me for staying with her. Telling others now would make them treat us differently, and I don't want that. Have you ever been close to a couple where it's known that one of the parties was unfaithful, and yet they're still together? I have, and everyone feels uncomfortable around them because infidelity is always the elephant in the room. One last thing, I ended up finding my wife's lover. He works at a small agency in another city of all places. And he's exactly as I imagined, a guy with a rather effeminate appearance who has aged into a man in his 60s, obviously leaning left on everything. I thought about contacting him to see if my wife's story matched up, but I decided not to for several reasons. By the way, my wife was left-wing when we first got married, but now she's more right-wing than I am on most topics, and I'm already quite conservative by her standards. I think she changed after our second daughter was born, or maybe she changed after the affair, realizing that weak men aren't good for marriage. Whatever the reason, today we're pretty much aligned on almost everything, which also influenced my decision. I'm going to end here. I have no intention of giving more updates because I'm done with all of this, and I want to leave it behind. Initially, I created this account to read product reviews and look for DIY advice, but I ended up using it mainly to read about infidelity since all of this started. Now I've gone back to using it for its original purpose and stopped looking at relationship stuff because, for me, it's just a depressing sea of toxicity. I feel better about everything now, but that may change tomorrow. And if it does, well, I'll act accordingly. This brings us to the end of this story. Some people really believe that infidelity can be justified with regret and a few therapy sessions. Please stop saying that. Therapy doesn't magically solve anything. That's ridiculous. It's a matter of broken trust, like shattered glass. You can't just glue it back together. It doesn't matter if it happened 8 years ago or last week. It's still relevant because the wife decided to hide it all this time. For those who say, "But look at how great their marriage was before this came to light." No, it wasn't a great marriage. It was a marriage built on lies. Yes, it's a complicated situation, but think about this. If she was truly sorry, why didn't she confess at that moment? It's too convenient that everything came out now. It's for this and other reasons that I think the author is making a mistake by staying in the marriage. But tell me, what's your opinion? What advice would you give the author? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, support the channel by leaving a like and a comment. And thanks to everyone for watching this far.